Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Marketing Mix Unmixed podcast, episode 2. Today, we have with us a special guest, Mr. Tony Evans. Tony Evans is a marketing science veteran and an AI specialist, and he has over a 2-decade experience in marketing measurement. Tony, welcome to the show. And first of all, huge congratulations on your book, Generation AI. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. Yes, after lots of time doing marketing measurement, looking at advertising, understanding advertising, I've just launched the book. There it is, in fact. So thank you for the warm words. It's doing quite well so far. I'm quietly pleased about the reception it's had so far. Well, quietly pleased, quite loudly pleased about the reception it's had so far. And there was a copy, by the way, that I've sent to you guys in the office over there. So I look forward to hearing what you think of it after you get the final copy.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the hard copy, but I have read the book twice already. It's an excellent read, and I would highly recommend this book to anybody. Tony, I think the book release has come at the very right time, given so much changes that is happening in the AI world. I think there's a lot of chapters in there that educates people on how to manage this transition. What is your take on how people should utilize this book and take cognizance of all the changes that is happening in the world, especially in the AI realm?
There's a lot of change. And I guess one of the main messages for people at the moment is that change is hard. It's not an easy thing to do. We're hardwired as humans not to really like to change, right? Like we protect ourselves by not changing too much. And change is getting quicker and quicker, but there's nothing that we can do to stop it. The AI train has left the station like a long time ago. And the vested interests in both the companies that are in the AI world and also the advantage that it brings to companies means that it's not going to go anywhere soon. And so using people and harnessing the power in the organization, the collective knowledge of the people that you have, combining the new technological skills with the crystallized knowledge of the older generation who've got the context of the business. I mean, that's the path that I see people needing to follow. I think there's one other important point, and that's about extracting value. That seems to be the world that we're in at the moment that's dominating who is growing in AI, how much value can be extracted by the large companies that want to protect themselves in the AI world.
Mm-hmm. Tony, your book is titled The Generation AI Leading People and Machines. I mean, of course, the technology, takes care of itself, but very few people, talk about how people should transition to it, how people should adopt to it. Is there a specific chapter in your book that kind of, guides the people on how they can, transition this particular tricky phase, if I may put it, because a lot of people have questions whether their jobs are going to be redundant or perhaps their jobs are going to be, require more, nuance, so as to speak. So what's your take on this?
There's quite a lot all the way through the book as a reminder to kind of leaders and managers that it's within your organization that you have to make these decisions, right? So nobody outside your organization has got some sort of magic information on how AI should best be applied inside it. Like all leaders need to work that out within the context of their own organization. Anyone who comes along and says here's a magic AI tool, it's not going to work. Or here's a magic AI process, not going to work unless it's really right for your business and answering a business problem of some sort. So I think the identification of what do you want AI to be applied to? What is the business challenge that's needed as a first thing is what every organization needs to do. So in terms of the book, yes, the book has many frameworks that help leaders identify where's my organization actually at. I think one of the most useful things in the book for managers and leaders are the prompting questions at the end, and they come in two forms. One is the kind of questions that a leader should be asking themselves or their teams. That question and set of questions that come through at the end of every chapter are designed to help people stop and pause and think about what does this really mean for my organization? The second thing is the GPT prompts. And as you know, the wonderful work that you guys have done to build a custom GPT, there's a way that we should be interrogating, I think, any question that we're asking at the moment using a GPT. This specific custom GPT is perfect because it allows you, within the confines of just the book and the research behind it, it allows you to look at this information. So taking these questions and these prompts putting it into a custom GPT will allow you to see exactly what the book says about it. But yes, to come back to your question, there is plenty of frameworks to identify where you're at, and also frameworks of like, what are the stages of development for AI that I need to go through for the future? And then vitally, are my people ready for it? What's the change management process that's needed?
Great. Thanks for that, Tony. Talking about core topics, right? It all started with the chatbot phenomenon, right? I mean, for you and I mean, we have played with the earliest chatbot, Eliza. I'm pretty sure some of the gray-haired people also must have heard about it. But back then, Eliza did not quite catch on because it wasn't, giving us a very human experience, right? People were easily trying to, break it, and they did succeed as well. They asked some tricky questions, and they didn't give a very comprehensive and accurate answer. But, when ChatGPT came onto the scenes, people did try to break it, but they felt that no, it is giving a really coherent and great answer. Uh, do you think, chatbot has caught on at the right time, at the right place, and perhaps ChatGPT is the one, reaping rewards of earlier, technological innovations? If you quite recollect, I think it was Google which quite came up with the transformer model first, and that formed the basis of, all these large language models. Perhaps ChatGPT was, at the right time, at the right place, and they just caught on. What is your earlier recollection of, using Eliza, and how you think this particular phenomenon has caught on?
I think all these things kind of build on each other over a period of time. The If I think back to how chat was happening online at one point, like bulletin boards. I don't know if you ever remember bulletin boards. I'm probably too young to remember bulletin boards, but like that was a way that things were done at some point and how we engage with people online. The early days for a lot of people, including millennials, was like Messenger, and AOL, like, having the small kind of pop up. And if we think about like the idea of going on to Messenger or a chat room or something like that, it feels a little bit alien now compared to like how most people are doing things, exchanging messages via WhatsApp, et cetera, et cetera. So I think most of these things are iterations on a previous form. That original chatbot, Alicia, as you mentioned, it is an earlier form of that. I think ChatGPT have built on top of these ideas, not just that one, but a number of them. And maybe the key thing is that it's not just the idea, but like who does it really well. If you think back to my old workplace, if you think back to Facebook, Facebook wasn't the first social network, and Mr. Zuckerberg is quite happy to admit that it wasn't the first social network. What he did it like way better than other people can. I say way better, both the user experience, but also the data structure that's needed in order to understand what's going on behind the scenes, how people are engaging, how that data can be stored and used to make a better user experience and a better advertiser experience. Like that was something that was done way better than other people. And so I think if you take the example of ChatGPT and OpenAI, yes, they built on previous models. Yes, they've certainly taken the transformer ideas from Google's original 2017 paper, and they've built a much better system. Did they do it just by coming up with the idea? No, but they've got a very, very clever way of using transformers in order to be able to answer the questions that we like to do it. And I guess that's the final point on it. Like we like to chat in a particular way. Like as humans, we like to converse a particular way. And that's why the chat function within ChatGPT designed to feel quite real is probably landing with so many people quite well. And I think we are seeing a time at the moment where we're maybe over indexing towards that, where people are trusting ChatGPT way more than they should have done. I think even just this week, Sam Altman himself has come out and sort of said, like, it's not a therapist, right? Like, be careful with what you're doing with it. Because it's designed, I think, like a lot of other online properties, to be psychologically rewarding in how we engage with them. So I think we've got to be careful of what it's actually for. It's a pile of code, and a pile of code, very, very smart pile of code that responds to us in a particular way. How that plays out in the future, like how that enhances over the next couple of years. Are OpenAI going to have the next iteration of whatever that is? That's going to be I guess, the thing that everyone's looking to for the next 2 to 3 years.
Uh, Tony, you're also a psychologist, and you have dealt with human behavior, human experiences. I mean, when we talk about AI, we think about advancement in human civilization. But if you think about the current, AI progress that we are making, it is harping back to one of the, human primal needs of conversing, as you rightly put it. If you think about it, it's quite intriguing thing that, we people like to converse, and that's how, AI is enabling that. Otherwise, if you look back again to the Eliza chatbot time period, people were just asking really one-word questions. What is the time today? What is the day today? But if you look today, people are conversing with ChatGPT like, hey, my dad's birthday is today. Suggest me the best gifting options. So it's a coherent sentence that is being keyed in as though you're conversing with another human being. Don't you think it's quite intriguing that even though the AI progress is pushing us in the forward direction, but still we are hopping back to one of our primal needs of conversing with each other.
Yeah, and I guess even going back to that, people treating it like a therapist, there is a lot within the human psyche which just requires belonging and acceptance, Our group dynamics since the very earliest like formations of groups that we've had is about safety of the group and acceptance by the group. If some form of tool is giving us acceptance and reassurance, there is definitely something that it will trigger inside us with the way that our brains work to think, well, this is okay. So I think if you look at the way that answers are framed back, and I don't know if you do this, but I don't treat ChatGPT like a colleague personally. I know a lot of people who do. A lot of people have conversations. I've been tempted to argue with ChatGPT, but like treating it like a colleague is probably a very bad idea. In the same way as treating it like a therapist is a bad idea. Yes, it's really, really useful for providing information, but we're not building colleagues with AI. We're building tools. And yes, understanding the tools and like when they should be used and when they should actually make decisions or when we should make decisions is certainly something that needs to be done. But it's not a colleague in any other way than it's not a therapist, right? Like it's a very useful tool. I think sometimes, and I have to remind myself of this because ChatGPT does a great job of apologizing when it gets something wrong, if it's called out for that. And that's designed to kind of give us this, cognitive engagement in some ways with this thing as it being more than a tool. If you were to treat it like a colleague, it's like an entry level intern that you should treat it as. The information that comes out, and by that I mean, it's not that it's not smart, of course it is, but by that you should check the work. There's no way that somebody with no context of your job can really understand when you give them a task for the first time, is this right or wrong? And so checking the work is really, really important. And I'm sure if you and many other people watching have ever checked the work of ChatGPT, you can find it's wrong pretty often, right? And so that's what we have to bear in mind, that, it's wrong. It's a tool. It's not a human. It's not a colleague.
Yeah, I mean, it does get a lot of things wrong, but I think for a layman, it is good enough, to get by. But for experts like you and me, we can always find millions of, errors, loopholes in ChatGPT or any similar LLMs. Yeah. Tony, we have established that, it all started from, Eliza. There was a chatbot, but it didn't quite catch on. But then we came to, the ChatGPT era from OpenAI, where people, were trying to, converse, and they found it really intriguing. And for the first time, they found that, it's giving a human-like response, and it caught on, right, like a wildfire. Somewhere, do you think Google was caught napping and they were behind the scenes? Now everything is chatbot, everything, right? For example, people want everything to be rendered in a conversational way. The way people, extract information, seek knowledge has changed forever, perhaps. Now I just saw one particular ad where a person is talking about Nike shoes inside Perplexity. Earlier it used to be, hey, I'm looking for, shoes on Google search, but right now he's going to Perplexity through Google, but then in Perplexity, he is searching for this particular Nike shoes. How do you see this change? What do you think, Google kind of got right or got wrong? Do you think they have fallen behind a little bit?
I felt for a long time that Google, like, were caught napping, right? But I realized that as an outsider of the organization, you can never really know what's going on. Google is a huge company. That's a kind of blessing and a curse. Their trailing 12-month revenues are what, $370 billion? Right? They're getting something right in order to be where they are at the moment. And I think that if I was to think back to the last or the current kind of earnings call that's just come out, I really expected to see a downturn in search revenue. If I was a betting man on the stock market, I would have been prepared to bet on that. And I would have been wrong. That hasn't been what we've seen in the latest earnings. And so, are Google napping? Or are they watching from afar? They've got a lot a lot of very smart people doing very smart things in the various labs. And I think over a period of time, they're actually establishing like what is the right action or the best course of action that they should take. So if we think, for example, about the AI search overviews that have recently come out, like that's not new. It didn't just suddenly appear a few months ago, right? Like this is something that's been going behind the scenes that you could sign up to in 2023, 2024, where AI search interviews are being returned. And so Google's had plenty of time to work out, like, what does this do? What does this do to people's actions? Are they spending more time in search, less time in search? Are they clicking more? Are they clicking less? And then vitally, what's the value of those clicks going to be? So I think that Google are watching these things very, very closely. Now, to it being a curse, a large organization, to be able to change if you need to very quickly is difficult. Perplexity, as you mentioned, is a much more nimble organization because it doesn't have the size of staff and the processes that could slow a large organization down. And so if Google are able to carry on, if they're able to carry on being nimble and quick at doing the right thing, then they stand a chance of not having their lunch eaten by somebody else, because there are plenty of other people out there who are willing and looking to capture the value, like Perplexity, as you mentioned.
Do you think Google missed the trick by not trying to acquire Perplexity? I mean, I could see a lot of similarities between, Perplexity and Google. In a way, perhaps Perplexity was trying to ape, Google by kind of, giving the links associated with the answers so that people could, click on them and verify. That is straight out of the book of Google, right? Whenever you key in some query, Google gives you all these blue links, which you can always click and verify and, get accurate responses. So do you think perhaps Google missed that bus?
So I wonder, like, at what stage and at what valuation are those companies actually valuable?
Mhm.
And I suspect that a couple of the large companies have looked at the crazy valuations, and I say crazy from the point of view of like not making any revenue, not looking like they're going to make any revenue or meaningful revenue some point soon, and still looking for a massive valuation. And that's a factor of both the market that we're in at the moment, the heat around the words AI, and also probably some of the founders of those companies operating in a very different way, operating with a confidence that they've got something that is different to the previous generations, that should be valued in a different way. Now, are any of those companies going to defy the law of economics? I think it's unlikely. Are they capturing something that is, a value that we don't yet know about? It's possible, and that's obviously what they're trying to base their valuations on. And so my guess is that at some point Perplexity's value was talked about and considered to be a bit rich for the people who are buying it. If you look conversely at what Meta did recently and buying into a very expensive person who is now leading a lot of that like section of Meta around AI. Like, is that a good buy or a bad buy? Like the future will tell us, right? Like Meta and Zuckerberg's got a pretty good track record of spotting some of these things. I think Instagram, when it was bought for $1 billion, was seen to be a crazy valuation. Look at it now. So I think that time will tell whether people will regret turning down the offers that they've actually got. Just to round off on that, though, there's a lot of people and maybe people of the older generation who've seen bubbles before in the stock market who are like, yeah, this is a bubble, right? And there's a lot to be said for the fact that this is a bubble at the moment. And so I think that there are a number of companies who will be able to extract value, who are the larger companies. There's a number of companies who probably underneath the surface, not the most obvious ones, but like the guys who are connecting up the pipes between like one place and another. There's probably quite a lot of value still to be had in those and looking at those companies, because it's not just Perplexity and what it can do and Google what it can do. There's a whole system underneath it of different data providers, different data connectors that are working to make sure this works. And so there's probably some value in there.
Yeah, you're quite right that Google has some of the smartest people out there. I mean, if you look at their headquarters, the amount of people, the intelligent people per square kilometer is the highest perhaps anywhere around the world. Perhaps maybe Facebook and Netflix and the typical FANG companies might compete with them. So Google kind of saw the writing on the wall, so as to speak, and they could see that, hey, Perplexity and ChatGPT are gaining steam, and the way people seek knowledge and get access to them has fundamentally changed. It's no longer, keying in a phrase and waiting to get the answers, but it's more conversational in nature. So perhaps they did, anticipate that in the future, Perplexity and ChatGPT might try to create a, Google of themselves, and that's what has happened right now. If you just notice, just a couple of weeks ago, I think Perplexity has announced that they're going to create their own web browser, and OpenAI has also announced that they're going to create their own web browsers. What do you think about this particular battle of web browsers? Do you think it is challenging the reign of Google?
I mean, it's what a time to be alive, right? It's fascinating to see this happening in the industry at the moment. If you'd gone back to the start of search and said that Google will be this dominant in the future, that they would have like the vast majority of searches, which they have enjoyed for a long time, I think it would have been difficult to believe that one company could quite be that dominant. But they've done a very, very good job of search, right? Like over the years, a very good job of search. Certainly in the earliest years, the organizing of information has been absolutely phenomenal. Maybe over latter years, the prominence of adverts and like pushing things to the top of the feed, have they been as relevant, the search returns as in previous years? That's one thing that some people could debate. But I think that utility within Google and making sure that utility is great is something that's got to be emulated. You've got to take quite a lot to move away from Google onto another browser. There are other browsers out there, but it's very difficult to move on to them. You can try and use Bing for argument's sake. And I tried to make the shift away from Google a little while ago. Difficult because Google do things well. Google's also got the advantage of having the login via Chrome. And that's vital because the information that they can retain about who people are, what they're doing within their journey, like all of that is really, really useful from an advertising point of view. So I think to the question on Perplexity's browser, and other people, let's say ChatGPT, decide to do the same thing through OpenAI. This is all about data and data retention, right? It's all about like the first party data, which is absolutely vital. How do these companies get it and own it? We've seen a world over the past few years where Apple have gone down the route of saying, well, we're not going to share any of this information. We're just going to use it for ourselves. And I think that's what they were doing. So we're not going to share any of this information, but within the App Store, we'll do certain things, but we'll make sure that your information is private, not shared with other parties. Everyone then has to go down a first-party data route. Meta with a conversions API, making sure that information can be passed backwards and forwards securely, so they don't rely on things outside of their control. And so I think that this will be the thing for Perplexity. It's not so much that they need an extra browser, but they can't get the information unless they have an extra browser. So Perplexity and ChatGPT, I think, will do that. The battle then becomes, how do I get them to come to my browser rather than to go to Chrome? And with everyone so heavily weighted within Google towards, well, I'm logged in on Google. I've got this search thing. It kind of works quite well. I've got Google Sheets and I've got Google Docs that I use and I store everything in Google Drive. It's quite a big ask to get me to move into something else.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make. People say that, inertia could be a boon or a bane. I think for Google here, it looks like it could be a boon, right? I mean, they have a 20-year head start. I mean, people think that, hey, ChatGPT just came along and it's going to eat their lunch, but they had a head start for quite 20 years. It's really hard to, dislodge them, right? I mean, as you rightly said, they come up with a, whole lot of packages. It's just not, search. They give you Google Drive, they give you Gmail. It's all there, right there, right? And it might be difficult, but what do you think about the numbers that is coming out very recently? People say that Google has, started to, roll out AI overviews because it did see a slight dip in the search traffic. Do you have some data around it?
Yes, I'm just trying to call up the latest figures. So like ComScore and StatCounter, who two companies that look at share of search overall. If you to look at standard search, like, and just the search terms, what's happening, like Bing are making some inroads. So just in the US, if you look at the period like before Copilot, and the AI influence that Bing had, the relationship that they have with other platforms like Meta in terms of providing search answers. If you look at if you look at the difference there, so before Bing and Copilot, under 27% was Bing's share of the US search, and it's now over 29. So it's grown by 2 points. I mean, Google during that time has declined by a point, but Google's still over 60%, so it's around about 60%. So it's not huge. If you to look at that worldwide, the drop is a bit more stark. So Google have probably over that same period lost about 6 points, and Bing has grown about 3 points on a global basis. But Google is still looking about 80% of global search of share of search. is that a trend that we'll see continue potentially? And the AI overviews is a really interesting way of looking at it. So AI overviews not everywhere, right? Like I didn't realize this wasn't available in every country, or Google are following a different strategy in some countries than others. Maybe as they test this out. What we're seeing from the earnings this week is, as you know, it's the earnings season at the moment. I really expected Google's search numbers to go down, and people are clicking less, absolutely. But Google are making more money, which is really interesting, right? Like generally speaking, we would presume clicks go down, money goes down. No, like the AI search that they are putting out at the moment, or the AI overviews of the search, is returning more relevant results for people, and therefore the value of those clicks is worth more to the companies that it is referring traffic to. This is bad for publishers who are looking for volume of traffic so they can make money from the traffic that comes to their websites for showing ads, etc. This is good for Google, who are basically making more money for less clicks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll touch upon AI overview shortly. But before that, do you think Perplexity and OpenAI have the critical mass to start their own, browsers, so as to speak? Uh, of course, you talk numbers, and I also, checked. Of course, Google, doesn't have to worry about Perplexity and OpenAI right now because their search query volume is nowhere near Google. I mean, some numbers put it at they're just, hardly 4% of, Google right now. But that number is growing, and maybe Google is just preempting themselves and trying to play a watch and wait game, and launch AI overviews quite early to arrest this particular decline that you're talking about. But yeah, coming back to the question, do you think this particular critical mass is kind of available currently to Perplexity and OpenAI to start their own browsers?
More easily for OpenAI than Perplexity, just because of the size difference. There's a lot more people using OpenAI than using Perplexity. And so like that's a more easy transition, I think, for OpenAI to open the door to a browser. The critical mass like requires a couple of things. It requires the tech, but it also requires funding. There's been a lot of talk about like, what's the burn rate of OpenAI? Like, when are they going to make money that justifies like the money that they're burning in order to get there? Like, will they run out of runway before they make enough money? They're now making a bunch of money, right? Like, I think their run rate at the moment, as of July, is about 15 billion a year, right? So through subscriptions and that kind of stuff, it's big. If you look at the next largest people, if you look at Claude, Anthropic, it's a fraction of that size that they're making through subs. I think it's around 2 billion, rather than the amount that the run rate that OpenAI have got. Perplexity are probably like even smaller than that. And so it requires a lot of faith in investors to forward fund all of the stuff that is needed in order to justify carrying on spending for them to grow. And there's a lot of growth that's needed if you're going to get that critical mass, the critical mass that's kind of vital for the stickiness that's required within the site, like all of the partnerships that have to be done between OpenAI and other people, like all of that's going to take a bunch of money, let alone the serving of all of this stuff. The serving and the tech infrastructure costs a bunch of money to keep up.
Yeah. I mean, you might remember that, in our usual day-to-day conversations, people just casually used to say, hey, let's Google it. I can see that, people are using Google it slightly lesser nowadays. And people are, more using, hey, let's chat GPT it. I know it's a mouthful, but still it's, people are saying, hey, let's chat GPT it. And I can hear it, in the streets of Bangalore, in the streets of Mumbai, Delhi. If it is so, common, I think perhaps, chat GPT and Perplexity have arrived, and maybe Google needs to sit up and take notice. Do you think the verb Google it changing to ChatGPT 8 is a cause of concern for Google right now?
I mean, if I was Google, I'd be looking at this and thinking, well, what do I do about it, right? ChatGPT, as you know, like OpenAI are developing a wearable of some description. We don't know what that is, but having stolen Apple's kind of top designer to make this item, we will probably see something different in terms of how we interface with that GPT in the future. And that will be a moment of like, well, let me GPT it as opposed to let me Google it. Because that will be kind of one step closer. Zuckerberg this week has been talking about the future of superintelligence and personal superintelligence, and particularly how that is likely to come through a wearable like glasses. And so, like Google going down that route as they've tried so far and making a wearable, I think is probably the right route to go down if OpenAI are going to have a wearable as well. Now, whether OpenAI's wearable is a device that sits in your ear and you can GPT it just by asking questions, I think that is probably going to be the next stage that Google are going to have to go down. So at the moment, I have to go onto a phone or I have to go onto a laptop in order to Google it. It is more difficult to do that via audio. I don't know of anyone really who's doing it via audio. I know a lot of people who are using ChatGPT via audio, and ChatGPT are also going to make it easier through the world of agents now that they've released agents to connect up with other audio-based devices so that you can get more audio information on when you're GPTing. The Meta glasses, I have the Meta Ray-Bans, and that is phenomenal in terms of being able to give me information constantly when I'm asking it questions about what's going on around me. And that's only going to get better. So long-winded answer to say, I think if Google go down the route of wanting to fend off someone saying GPT it in the future, wearables is probably the route that they're going to have to go down because that's where OpenAI are likely to be.
That's an interesting idea, Tony. Yesterday, there was a flood of posts on LinkedIn. I don't know whether you saw it. People were like, hey, Google is indexing ChatGPT conversations. But the truth was that only if you tick the checkbox, make my conversation discoverable in ChatGPT, your conversations will be indexed by Google. But if you come to think about it, why would, Google try to, index ChatGPT's conversations? And do you think this could be an incentive for, ChatGPT or Perplexity to, kind of come out of this Russian doll, so as to speak? I mean, if you think about the web browser as a Russian doll, the Matryoshka doll, Perplexity and, OpenAI, they're kind of nested within Google. But they will not take it lightly when, Google tries to index their conversations. They might say that, hey, I want to come out and start my own web browser. And why even, give my audience, give my, content to Google? And do you think this could be an incentive for, OpenAI or Perplexity to really go full steam ahead and, establish their web browsers quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes back to like whoever owns the data, whoever owns the data of intent, like really owns the power within advertising, right? Like all of these guys with first party data are really looking for intent to make their products kind of more relevant. Make products more relevant, it means the advertising becomes more relevant and you can sell more ads. And that really, I think, is the path that most of these guys are going to have to follow. Like ChatGPT may be selling, 15 billion on a run rate of subscriptions. Is their future model going to be increasing that? And that 15 billion compared to Meta's revenue, compared to Google's revenue, like it's small. And so to justify this in the future, I can't see OpenAI doing anything apart from ads. I can't see Perplexity doing anything apart from ads in terms of the size that they want to be to justify the valuations. It's all in the ads, right? Like that's where the value is. And so capturing the intent and owning that is vital. Now, if you're reliant on Google to share information with you, to help you decide intent, like if you're Perplexity or if you're ChatGPT, that's not a great future. You want to own those pipes yourself, right? You want to own that data yourself. So owning the intent is, I think, the game that we will see the big guys. I say we'll see. The big guys are already playing this game. They want to own the intent, and they're just trying to figure out ways to do it. So yes, I think that will speed up the need for an alternative, whether it's a browser or something else, in the world of ChatGPT and others like Perplexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tony, you talked about AI overviews from Google. If you could just give a brief description about it to the general audience, what it is, and then we can go forward and discuss more nuanced topics under it. Yeah, if you want to just give a introduction to it.
Sure. Like so, my previous, let's say a year or so ago, I would type in, I'm looking for a holiday to the Cotswolds in England in September, and I would then have a lot of sponsored results. I would probably have some sponsored hotel results, places on the right-hand side. And I would have a number of underneath the sponsored results, a number of just generally returned information saying like, here's 4 or 5 of those index sites that you should go to based on the SEO kind of prowess of the companies behind those top results. The AI overview is taking the context within the search and providing an answer in the same way that maybe ChatGPT would answer the question. So I'm getting the nuance of what you're actually looking for. You don't want to be advertised to. Let me break it down and say, like, here's the things that are worth considering in your trip to the Cotswolds in September. So are you traveling by train? Are you traveling by plane? And then trying to get like the richness of the intent in the query to return the right kind of answer in the AI overview and make it useful to you rather than just what an advertiser wants to show you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a great description. Tony, when we talk about AI overviews, at the end of the day, it is a summarization, right? Summarization by nature are reductionist in nature. For example, if you had a 10,000 page document and I want a 1,000 page summary of it, I'm going to leave out certain details around it, right? When we have Google's AI overview kind of synthesize and summarize, let's say 10 pages altogether, there are chances that some of the publishers would be left out. How much of a issue do you think this is? Because earlier people used to think that, hey, if I'm going to put out great content out there, Google is going to use its page rank algorithm, and somehow I'm going to be featured up. Of course, you can always have the sponsored content, the paid content, which is going to be shown above you. But right now, if you look at the pecking order, the pecking order is first the AI overviews, then the paid search ads, and then at the last is the organic search. And if you're lucky, you might be shown there. So how do you see this playing out?
I mean, that's a problem for those publishers, right? Like it's a problem for anyone who's investing a lot of money in getting to the top of the search ranking. So previously, if you have a model like within a company that it's worth investing X in order to be number one because number one receives the most clicks, you've got to question that moving forwards to say, does that still have the same weight as it did a couple of years ago? And then if you're projecting that forward, is that still going to be as important in a year's time or 2 years' time? Like, should I be looking at something else instead? So that's definitely a thing that the companies who are looking at that and how much they invest in these areas, where do you want to go for the traffic? You care about getting the right clicks at the right price. And if you're no longer getting those from the organic results, got to be different. I do think that there'll be a game afoot for sure, right? Like as there was with getting the search rankings, there was back in the day of early search, there was black hat techniques and white techniques of doing this, a lot of backlinks when people kind of realized that Google's algorithm featured backlinks, just dumping like thousands of backlinks between a load of different websites to try and juice the algorithm to say, well, this one's got a lot of backlinks. Let's do this. Google eventually catches up with that game and shuts that game down and makes people do things differently. We'll see the same thing within the ChatGPT world, or I say ChatGPT, in the GPT world generally. People trying to figure out how do I make the most of this. Now, I don't know if you're seeing this, but I'm already seeing people in my LinkedIn feed who are claiming to have figured out the algorithm that ChatGPT used and they can help you get better ranks on ChatGPT. Nonsense.
Mhm.
Like no one's figured this out just yet so far. And I think that we'll see a lot of claiming and like we will see advertisers falling for that kind of stuff in the same way that they've fallen for scams in the past of people claiming that they've got this sorted, just give me X amount of money and I can get you ranked. It's unlikely to be true. Even if you figured it out for today, who knows what's going to be the ranking algorithm in a week or time so in a week or so's time. So I think that we will have to advertisers will have to watch this space very carefully. Back to the question, and they'll have to make decisions around like what is actually truth here? How do I make the right decision here? But to that question on like, as you were asking about the publishers, the publishers are the ones who will suffer from this. If they were reliant on ad revenue for directing people to their sites, clicks are going down. The AI overview is taking people away from those clicks and it's not going away. And Google are going to want to continue to keep those AI overviews there because they're making more money doing it. So I suspect those publishers are going to have to pay a new game. The full circle of that, if you've got nothing to rank, like what do Google actually do? Right? So if you haven't got people competing to be number one on organic search, how much does that affect Google and what they're actually trying to rank and how easy it is for them to rank? I don't know. Surely the smart people at Google will be looking at that.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the web search page as a real estate, AI overviews currently is the most sought after, and perhaps it's going to be the most expensive, property out there because a lot of people are going to vie for that particular, section. And if you look at the AI overviews right now, hardly, the top four searches are shown, or the top 4 vendors are shown, right? And people are going to fight for this. Do you think, this is going to, lead to a, bidding battle? And also the cost per click, do you think this is going to go up, at least in the AI overview section?
So the bidding battle, to a degree, yes. But bear in mind, like Google's algorithm has never been just about the money. Like there's always been a relevance score, quality score that they apply to make sure that it's not just the bid, it's the bid and the relevance for the user. Because if you don't return a good service to the users will go somewhere else. Google's always had that balance pretty well, I think, of like balancing between what service do I provide and how do I make money at the same time. So I think that is probably a factor in the ranking. The other part of your question, I'm sorry, just repeat the question again.
Oh, sorry, come again.
Just repeat the question again, if you don't mind. I just remember the second part of your question you were saying. So that's about the ranking. What was the other thing you were asking?
Yeah, I mean, my question was around, yeah, of course, AI overview has become the most expensive real estate currently, right? I mean, a lot of people are going to bid for it. And generally speaking, AI overviews just shows you the top 4 results, but that means the other publishers are going to be left behind. And I did have a interesting conversation with a fellow market mix modeling vendor, and he was like, "Hey, if people are searching for MMM, AI overview might show results, but those people are not going to be experts. They might have just sprung up in the last 2 years. What about the OG players? Let's say Nielsen's of the world, Kantar's of the world. They are not going to show up in the AI overviews. I mean, to your point of whether people are just going to buy it and go ahead with these vendors, they may go ahead, but they're not getting the right results at the end of the day, because these new people may not have proven themselves. But whereas the old people, the old OG vendors might have proven themselves, they're in the business for a long time, they know their craft. But how do we ensure that whatever AI overviews spewing to the people is the accurate results?
The thing I would love to see is that people kind of take the output of AI overviews in the same way that they should take the Google overview, as in the search results, is it's not complete. So I think about conversations I used to have with my son when he was younger and doing his homework. And he would, if he used Google, more often than not, like rely on the top answer or maybe top 1 or 2 answers, and trying to explain to him, somebody who's born digital, that's just like one lens. And how do you know you can trust it? But there is an almighty amount of trust that people put into that, right? I think the same's happening with GPT, because it's conversational, seems quite friendly. Like people just trust the answers that come out of it. So I really hope that we see people kind of move away from that, because there's all sorts of nonsense that is out there of people just wanting to extract money from your pocket and put it into their own pocket. You make a good example with the MMM vendors, over the past couple of years. Like, how many times have we seen someone saying, well, AI will take care of this? AI doesn't take care of it, right? Like, yes, AI could be a useful tool in building some things within the modeling world, but like just to run it through an AI model and say like, well, that's taking care of it is preposterous, right? And I really hope that advertisers kind of slow down and think about that. And instead of just taking the first answer that sounds fancy, or because it happens to be #1 answer in Google, we treat it with like a bit of a pinch of salt, right? Like there are I think very few other walks of life where we would trust things so blindly. If we walked into a coffee shop, and talk to someone in the coffee shop that we don't know, like, who tells us that this is the horse that you should bet on in the Goodstone races tomorrow, or this is the stock you should buy. Like, we wouldn't do it, right? So we do a little bit more research. So hopefully, I think that people will do the same thing. The other bit that I did want to come back to was about cost per click that you were talking about a second ago. Like, does cost per click change? And I think the answer is yes. I think clicks get more expensive, but that's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if your model of understanding clicks and value of clicks is one dimensional. So if I just think like a 50-cent click this year that I got, and next year if it goes up to 55 cents, that's bad. I don't care what I'm paying for clicks if the conversions are good. And so if the AI overview is sending me better converting customers, I'll pay a much higher price per click, as long as the overall CPA, the cost per acquisition at the end of it, is lower, right? So I think that's one of the things that people have to bear in mind. We need new models for these new times, and so relying on the old models in exactly the same way when you're doing attribution would be pointless, with the exception, of course, of a tested technique like multi-mix modeling. When we're looking at marketing mix overall, this is relying on things in a totally different way. We're not dependent on the output of a cost per click to know the value of a particular channel. And so I think that's why it's going to be good marketing mix modeling is going to be persistent through these times.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point. I mean, as they say, the more things change, the more they remain the same. At least for I think will still remain relevant, even though, the whole world is changing because of AI. So yeah, coming back to the, AI overviews versus page rank algorithm, yeah, your point is absolutely correct. But the thing is that, at least with page rank algorithm, there was a way of, transparency to know that, okay, a certain page is ranked higher, probably because it has more backlinks. Yes, it's another matter that, backlinks can be gamed and all that. But if somebody has to, get featured in the AI overviews, they don't know how to do it right now. They don't know how to incept their, content or their website into this AI overview. We are left at the mercy of, a black box algorithm. What's your take on that? I mean, it's totally, totally black box for all the publishers to get themselves featured into AI overviews. Some would also argue that they would prefer the old world where, at least we are ranked basis the, the page rank algorithm.
Yes, but we're not in control of that, right? I think being in control of Meta's algorithm, Google's algorithm, or whatever the future OpenAI algorithm is, it would be nice to know it, right? The volume of conversations that agencies have with these with these owners of the sites to say, like, show us your algorithm. It's like they're never going to show it. I mean, it's proprietary, and we have to go along with whatever it is. It's back to that point about like trying to make the best of your understanding of the algorithm. Now, Meta will describe quality score and like the impact of that. Google will talk about relevance and relevance score. Like these things and making the best of them, I think has to be done by trial and error. You're never going to understand it completely. It's just not possible and it changes so frequently. And I suspect that even internally, these algorithms are so complex that very few people really have a handle on the whole algorithm, exactly how it works, exactly how it ranks. I think there are a number of people who understand various bits of it, but for one person to be able to understand the whole thing, I think is probably unlikely. So anyone outside who's selling the solution and saying like, well, I've got this OpenAI algorithm cracked and I can get you up the listings, not likely.
Yeah, you make a very interesting point, Tony. I mean, earlier we had a non-AI algorithm, which was kind of like easier to tweak, and hence, there was more dynamism. For example, a new vendor could really, bring out a lot of good content onto the internet and hope to get ranked better than their rivals. Right now, because it is now AI overviews, which is again, backed by an AI algorithm, as you rightly said, it could be billions of parameters, that one would have to tweak. And for those reasons, there could be a little bit of stickiness where people would say that, hey, I'm not going to change the algorithm because, it runs the risk of, spoiling the results. And do you think this kind of, gives us the sameness? People are habituated to, looking at things that is almost always the same. And there's no real dynamism, going forward.
And I wonder how much influence AI has on that. The training, the reinforcement models that are used to reinforce. Does that give us a perpetuating circle? I haven't got a clue. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I do think that we are likely to be at risk of a lot of sameness, but I do think that we are so early in the stages of this at the moment. Like AI is not new as we know. The iteration of generative AI that people engage with through GPTs is relatively new for most. And so I think there's a lot of learning that still needs to be done, both by people using it, the companies and looking at the user behavior, and also advertisers and how they can possibly take advantage and engage with it.
Yeah, I mean, just to refine my question better, I mean, in the sense that, if I update my website with a lot of great content, I would have to wait for, Google's AI overview to, scroll my website again. But that could be, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks down the line, or, maybe a month down the line, given that, it's so complex to, spawn all of internet and, use this big large language model to, give you a very comprehensive result. Earlier, that wasn't the case. It was just a, for the lack of better word, a very simple algorithm, which is based on, how many backlinks refer to your, website, and it's just a page rank algorithm. And because of this, do you think publishers stand to lose out? They might lose out to people who are featuring in the AI overview sections, and eventually that will augur bad for them.
Yeah, yes, I do. I mean, I do think that those AI overviews are going to be favored because they make more money for the people who produce those overviews and because they are more accurate at returning what users actually want. So I do think they're going to be they're going to be favored. Can publishers take advantage of them? Yes, I'm sure they can. We don't know how just yet. And so this will be the game for a little while. And maybe we'll see some black hat, white hat whilst this goes on. But like I said before, like no one's got this cracked just yet. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to understand it further. I think just to give maybe a slightly sideways example on this, of the games that people play. If we think about like applications on CVs and LinkedIn, like one of the things that people have started doing, and I don't know if the tools that automatically read CVs, the ATS systems that are out there, the applicant tracking systems, they look for certain keywords. And so some enterprising graduates, what they're doing is they enter that world is putting the keywords in a tiny, tiny font and doing thousands of those in white at the bottom of the page. And so you cannot see them with the naked eye when you look at the piece of paper, but this is exactly what the machine is scraping, right? So I think that is a game that we will see played in various places. And eventually the ATS providers will be like, that was smart, but we'll close that down because that's not really what the purpose of the CV reading machine is there for, right? So I think that we'll see various iterations as people find ways around it. People are very creative, right? And particularly when money's involved, people are very creative. And so I think we will see some black hat and white hat as people trying to figure this area out.
That's an interesting point. Tony, you must have observed that even Bing has started to roll out something similar to Google AI overviews. They have their own Copilot version of it. And I'm pretty sure if Perplexity comes out with their own browser, or, ChatGPT comes out with their own browser, they will have this Google AI overview. You made the remark that, accurate results, but from a publisher's point of view, they would argue that, hey, that may not be accurate, may be relevant, and do you think this kind of opening up some kind of legal trouble for all of these players, because AI overview at the end of the day, it's again going to be a black box, and people are going to, contest the accuracy of results, whether it is really relevant.
So I wonder, so like, what's the law of Google having to return certain results, Like the competition authority, the I think it's the FTC that govern this in the US, I think. Like they're going to say, is this company in a dominant position? Are they the monopoly in the market? If so, they've got to act in a particular way, or they've got to break the company up. When we look at the size of this market and how it's broken down, I don't see any monopoly anytime soon, right? But there's many different ways you can get information through LLMs, and so like what these companies choose to put as their preference of, let's say, the number one spot, I don't think is a legal matter straight away. It's only a legal matter when it comes to the question of like monopoly and like what's being returned then. That would be my understanding as a non-lawyer of how that area might actually work.
I mean, apart from the monopoly point of view, I'm talking about, whether publishers would, kind of like, go up and take up in arms and say that, hey, the results rendered by AI overviews of any browser is not accurate, and it is just favoring, few certain people. We want more transparency on how these, people are getting featured into, Google AI overviews, or let's say any AI overviews.
And I guess what do I do if I'm Google? Am I dependent on those people for my service? If so, I've got to listen to those voices. And if I'm not, then I don't have to listen to those voices, So yes, I would be, if I was in the publisher's shoes, I'd be very upset by some of the stuff that's going on because I've built my business model that way. But it comes back to change, right? Like we can't just expect things to stay the same because that was nice and convenient and I made a bunch of money that way, right? Like I think we have to look at the world is changing around us. We're not in control of those other things. And the phrase that, I can't really control anything apart from my own reactions to things should be something that companies kind of take heed to, right? Like I don't like the fact that this might be changing within my world, but I can only change how I react to it. I cannot control it. So I might go and bang the drum to Google and say, "Oh, this isn't fair," and Google will be like, "Yeah," but I don't think they're going to change their behavior unless they need the companies particularly to operate in a particular way. I could be completely wrong, and I don't want to sound harsh because I'm not in that world of depending on Google, but I don't see any of the big tech companies needing or wanting to do anything that is in service of looking after those businesses. In the world of AI overviews, I see that they're in the business and service of looking after themselves and their shareholders.
I mean, earlier, at least, the publishers stood a chance. I mean, they didn't have to actively spend on it, but do you think AI overviews kind of makes everyone want to, be a paid person, right? I mean, they have to pay for things to be get featured on.
For sure. Yeah. And so, like, maybe that's the thing. Like, you're even going to pay if you want more publicity for, let's say you have a website. Like, where do you go? You've got to find another way of getting the traffic to your website. And I wonder, I'm not saying this game is easy at all, but it's been convenient for a long time to know the rules of the game and to play them in a particular way. And like now that's changed. And I think we may look back at those days as being, well, that was pretty easy for us. We were playing the game on easy mode, and now things have just got more difficult. That's not to say they can't be figured out. That's not to say that people won't figure these things out. I think they will. But the game has changed, and it's all about the capturing of the value that the big guys want to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Tony, if you think about Google's moat, it was actually relevant research rendered in millisecond, right? I mean, who would have thought that, they would kill their own moat? Perhaps Perplexity and, OpenAI had something to do with this, but they are trying to, Google is no longer reliant upon, relevant and accurate results through PageRank algorithm. They are, trying to play the same game as, Perplexity and OpenAI, which is the AI summarization and AI overviews. Do you think, Google kind of playing this game is conceding that perhaps Perplexity and OpenAI are ahead in this game?
Or seeing that this is the path of the future. They must be looking quite closely at the growth of these companies and like why they're growing so well, and thinking, well, we've got to get on this train as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that Google have got to go down that route.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the moat, I guess what's Google's moat? I mean, it's been last clicking cookies for so long, right? Like, so how do you convince the world to carry on doing that? How do you convince people to carry on sharing the information that you can then link to intent? You do it via a browser. How do you keep people within your browser? If they're going to go to someone else's browser, well, give them what they want, give them a more relevant return of results by using something like an AI overview, because then you've got great results from Google. And why would you want to go to this new browser when you're getting what you need here? So I think that is whether Google likes having their moat interrupted or not. I think that their moat is about cookies. We've seen over the past couple of years what they've done or haven't done with getting rid of cookies, and why they want to retain information. That doesn't change. The retention of information comes from having users on your platform, and by monitoring their behavior and recording their behavior and like being able to do stuff with it. And that principle doesn't change at all. So they've got to find a way of making sure they do that, whatever it is. And if that happens to be, let's prioritize AI overviews, then that's going to be what they do.
Tony, let's talk about the impact of AI browsers, AI overviews, and AI agents on, the marketing measurement, right? This is a very hot topic right now. Do you think, multi-touch attribution has come back into relevance? I mean, if you think about it, people, giving a context to their search has a lot richer intent to it rather than just, some arbitrary, phrases thrown around, which used to be earlier on Google. But right now, coherent context, gives us better intent. Do you think whenever people are, searching for something on Perplexity, ChatGPT, or even right now on Google, right now, there's a lot more intent, behind those, words than before?
We're seeing longer searches on Google. So Google's the only one I think that the data has been released on, but you can put much more context into an 11-word search than a 3-word search. And so I think that's something that people are starting to do, and that's enabling the models that they have to return information to to be more accurate and to be more valuable, both to the advertisers and also to the user. And so that's one trend I think that we'll continue to see. I think in terms of where this fits within the marketing mix that an advertiser has, like all of these things have to be valued. When we think about MTA, like MTA satisfied a particular kind of want, I think, from advertisers to understand like which of these many digital channels is really driving success. And to be honest, I don't think MTA really cracked that ever. And I don't think that they're ever going to crack it, right? Like that was always really, really difficult problem. The amount of people who said, no, we've got it cracked, but didn't really have a good method of testing whether or not it was true. Like, is probably why MTA has fallen apart over the past couple of years. It is an immensely difficult problem to try and figure out. MTA, I know a lot of people who've been in the space and like who will admit that this is just really difficult. It's a very good sales story. Don't worry, I can tell you which of your digital channels is more valuable than others, right? By using this. And so this sale happened because of that. Like the complexities of that and all the things that have possibly influenced it. And then the technological complexities of like, how do you actually track it? Like at what time was someone influenced, on what device? Like how do you know which person was on which device? Immensely complex to do. So I don't think, unless we're in a world of like last click where Google are comfortable, or even first click where people may be comfortable, like that's probably the only world where some form of MTA system like has any power, right? Like compared to the other things that are there. We do see a lot of people talking about testing and testing for incrementality around the MTA models. I don't know that anyone has necessarily cracked that still. Yes, you can test for lift. You've got platforms that can do that. I find with all of these things, like they're all going to come with a degree of inaccuracy. The question is like, how much inaccuracy are you prepared to take with your marketing money?
Do you think this AI overviews is making the first touch also the last touch? I mean, there's a problem of zero click, right? Do you think that's happening right now?
Yes, for sure. I think just within the digital world, but I think what we have to bear in mind, and this is, let's say, the old, if you put the old school hat on and the complaint against the last click, let's say from TV, like there's a lot of other influences that happen within our journey, whether it's digital or whether it's offline, that actually influence that final click. And so, like, is the first touch that someone has as they put the search into a GPT, like whether it's first touch and then last touch being the same thing with zero click, like what actually influenced them to search that there in the first place? And how does an advertiser value that? So if we give the example like of a car purchase, the car brands that people may be choosing have not been influenced just within that GPT search, or probably not in the last month or even the last year. Like your preference for certain categories like cars, like could be a 20 or 30-year process, right? That someone favors a certain brand 20 or 30 years later. So I think it's immensely complex. I think within the digital world, could first touch be last touch, etc.? Yes, that's what we'll see. I do think that people will also fall for the trick of thinking, well, this is all that someone is thinking about. They're searching for Audi because the GPT is all they've ever known and needed to know, and that's obviously completely not true. You need to be able to value all those other bits within the chain that you use as a marketeer, and not rely on the sole and easy to track function of first and last click.
Interesting. Do you think brands will stop investing in paid non-brand search going into the future, given the advent of AI overview?
Paid non-brand search. No, not immediately. I do think that there's so many things within our companies that are just difficult to move away from. I've got this search team, like they're doing some stuff, they're going to carry on doing it, and it's going to take a long time before someone sits down and says, well, how much value are they actually really adding? Even though they could make this decision today, kind of looking forward. So I think there's a lot of kind of inertia just naturally in companies, the way that we build companies and the way that we build teams. And I don't think we'll see that change anytime soon. And paid search, like the branded, non-branded paid search, will benefit from that for a little while. I think being able to value what you get back from search is going to be a key thing. Like search has overplayed its hand for a long time by being the last click. in the chain. And it's very nice that you can see a relationship between, well, someone clicked on that, they put it in their basket and they bought it, right? Like that seems to be incredibly valuable without valuing all the other bits in the chain. And so I think that we've started to see advertisers over the past 5 years or so become better at this, but we've still got a long way to go. We still put too much emphasis on the wrong thing. So I think it'll be a while before we change our minds of like the relevance of search, branded, non-branded search. I think it'll be a little while before companies move away from that and see that they're not getting the value they once were.
Mhm. I mean, just an alternative point of view, Tony. I mean, if you think about, paid non-brand search, I mean, brands would before, advertise on that and try to grow the category, right? But if they were to do that in this AI era, there is no guarantee that their own brand will get featured, despite growing that category. And given this, a lot of uncertainty, do you think, brands will really go for it, or perhaps they will focus their attention more on a paid search, branded paid search rather than branded non-paid search?
It's possible. So I think again, like legacy systems, like what do some of these advertisers care about? And I've no idea why, but share of search seems to be the thing that dominates like several marketers' mind. Like, what's my competitor doing? They've got a bigger share of search. I've got to spend more because share of voice on other media mattered at some point. And so like that was a metric that someone decided a little while ago, like if we can increase this is the return. I don't know the research behind that to know exactly how that works, but like, let's say that it does work as share of voice on TV press or whatever, like applying the same thing within the digital world is difficult to move away from because if you're P&G and you're looking at Unilever, you're like, well, they've got a big share of voice. I want a bigger share of voice. And I think that those legacy systems are difficult for us to move away from mentally. So I think it's going to take a little while before we see a difference in that. If I was an advertiser, would I be moving away from that? Absolutely. Do I see the value in that? I as an advertiser, maybe if I've got hundreds of millions of dollars to spend, then I can afford to do some of this stuff. I really hope though that people are in this day and age paying a lot closer attention to making a decision like in 2025 using techniques that are there. Is this actually working for me? Is it returning value? And then testing this regularly to say, not just have I got share of voice, like, is this actually making a difference to my returns of sales? And applying those models on a more frequent basis. So I think that people should, and they can be doing this more frequently. They should be doing it more frequently.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the share of search kind of, getting split into two, one, the share of search with respect to the AI overviews, and then the non-AI overview section, and perhaps share of search on the AI overview, gets more limelight and it's more lucrative?
So would that be the thing to measure? Yes. I mean, if that's where you want to measure where consumers are, where they're spending their time and what's providing a return. And if that's what consumers are doing, like that's where we want to see advertisers spend their focus, right? But as we were saying earlier, we just don't know how you can get more share of like that overview that comes out of AI. Like, despite what people might say, this is changing very frequently. And so I think that to go after that and make that your only measure, like it would be a little bit, I think, a little bit foolish just to do that. There are so many other things that can and should be measured and can be measured with more accuracy than going after something like that, which is probably a proxy for the final sale that you're looking to make.
Tony, do you think this AI overviews and of course the creation of new AI browser is going to expand the marketing measurement field? What it is currently, it's going to expand it a lot.
Yes, I think if we look at like all of the iterations of different vehicles that have come along for advertising, they've all expanded the field of marketing measurement. We've got I feel, a lot better handle these days on how much of our advertising budget is wasted since those great words from Mr. Wanamaker nearly 100 years ago, right? Like we're better these days than we used to be, but there's still a long way to go. And so over the last decade, for example, the focus both of specialist companies and then the general interest of advertisers in like, how can I get better at measurement has certainly grown a hell of a lot, right? And I think that's happened for a few reasons. One, because the tech is there to do it. And the tech, I mean, there are smart people applying like large data sets or applying their knowledge to large data sets to actually draw patterns, right? That wasn't something that was easily done in or quickly done in the last millennia, right? So my time in the 90s, like doing that kind of stuff, very unlikely as I'm a grad entering the workplace, right? Like in 2021, 2022, there's much more capabilities, plus also education that's got into data science that helps people to actually do these things, right? So I think instead of it being as specialist and niche as it was, it expands out. So it gets to be applied to every new channel that comes along, and new people find new ways of doing it. You mentioned a couple of the legacy players like Nielsen from the past. If we look at like some of the new guys who come out in the past like 5, 6, 7 years doing smart stuff, there's a load of names that weren't there 10 years ago, right? Like, and I think that we'll see more smart techniques come over the next few years for sure.
Mhm. I mean, it will be interesting to see Perplexity and OpenAI feature in contribution charts going forward. I'm pretty sure they will get featured. What do you think?
For sure. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like what I really hope though, and this has been one of my bugbears, I think, of the process for a while. Is it just the revenue that should be measured when we look at this, right? And I say the revenue, the spend rather than revenue. Is it just the spend on OpenAI, or are there a load of other things that are connected to it? Back to the idea of SEO. No money is spent on SEO, but a lot of resource is spent on SEO. A lot of money can be spent on backlinking, etc. Right? So that all comes at a cost, and it's almost a hidden cost. And I think that if advertisers are taking on more and more advertising techniques and methods and channels, like there's probably quite a lot that is going into this bit that goes on ad tech. What we seem to be very good at doing in marketing is focusing on the bit that is most visible to us. Let's say the creative. A lot of marketers will focus on the creative. If you look at the actual proportion of money in creative relative to ad tech, like it's quite surprising how much is being spent on each, right? So are we going to see ways of baking in the ad tech and tracking costs and the functional costs of running things like getting up the rankings of OpenAI, if that becomes a thing, to do that measurement? I hope we do.
Mhm. That's an interesting thought. Do you think Perplexity and OpenAI will become like the new Google and set the new rules of the game? Perhaps will they be the one calling the shots for, Meta, TikTok, or, other social media channels?
So the partnerships, and then this is why what a great time to be alive in marketing, right? Like this is something that we'll see, I think, quite a lot. These deals and connections between each other. Do Meta join forces in some way with OpenAI? Do they make some form of data share available between the two of them? Like, is that a better tactic for both companies against Google? Do Apple partner with someone, or do they sit this one out? Like, do Google decide to do partnerships with certain people, or do they just decide to have the moat and protect it the way that they've always tried to protect it in the past? I think that's what's going to be fascinating. I think each of these companies want to own data in totality. Some of those companies are better at doing partnerships in order to achieve those ends than others. And I think that they're the ones that will probably be most successful. I think just one more thing on this, and I don't know that I've come to a conclusion on this so far, but if we think about like the nature of the open internet, we think about the nature of that bit of open AI that was really kind of the altruistic and for good and that kind of stuff, the bearing that may have over the commercial applications of the stuff that we're talking about isn't really something we're discussing too much. We're presuming that OpenAI is going to be like a commercial entity. I believe it will, because it already is, right? Like it'll have to act like a commercial entity as opposed to like doing stuff for the good of the world. The iteration of the internet and what we perceive to be the internet is something that we're seeing change. So I think that is going to be the interesting thing. Like, does that mean that we're in an open source world where everyone wants to do stuff for good, or we're in this closed kind of world that people just want to shut shop around their own first party data and not let anyone near it? So I think that's going to be fascinating to play out over the next 18 months or 2 years.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting point. So do you see, some kind of balkanization happening, around this web browser, space? Of course, for that to happen, first of all, Google needs to, lose its reign. Assuming that in a scenario where, Google is no longer the dominant player, and then there is, OpenAI, there's Perplexity. What would prevent, perhaps Meta has a lot of cash in the bank. They can launch their own web browser. Perhaps TikTok can also join in the party. And then we are in a scenario where we have so many different, web browsers out there for people to choose for. Do you think that's good for the people, or that's just too much complications?
I think that the competition is always good, right? Like it's got to be always good because it forces everyone to get better. And so I think that that proliferation of choice is a good thing. Can it last? No, like it's not possible. I don't think for there to be all these web browsers that can last. I think that we'll probably see some sort of consolidation over a period of time, whatever that is in the GPT, like sponsored answer, whatever it's going to be world. So I think there's likely to be some of that. How this all plays out, like it's anyone's guess at the moment. And I guess like investors and where money's being invested is the best place to look at like where are bets actually being placed. The bets in Silicon Valley, certainly at the moment, are on companies that can control the area around them as much as possible, that have got first mover advantage and that have got scale, and got the ability to scale. And I think anyone entering into that world outside of that is at a disadvantage because they haven't got the funding of the Valley. But that also brings in an interesting point. We talk about these things and we look at these things as a Western kind of ideal, right? Like there's a lot I think that we'll see play out in the world outside of that. You mentioned TikTok. We not really talked, we haven't touched at all on like what's China's influence? Will there be another deep seek moment when out of nowhere, a company that we haven't heard of really like comes up with something that purports to do what the others can do on a fraction of the compute power? So there's going to be these moments that I think come out from other countries in the future. The gravity that we're seeing at the moment pulls everything towards Silicon Valley. Trump's most recent iterations of the laws around the internet is trying to protect America as being like the leader in this space. We will see, I think, a different approach from Asia. We've got a lot of smart people coming out of universities in huge numbers in Asian countries, right? And so, like, will that have a bearing on the future of what actually happens? The volume of smart people in India that are coming out of the best universities, if they can get access to the infrastructure rather than being like siphoned off into Silicon Valley with the attraction of going and working there, like if that's something that is possible, the infrastructure is built to kind of protect that. In the Middle East, the investments and particularly the governmental views of how do we help people to build? How do we make laws that are friendly to building in this region so that we own a good stake of this in the future? Versus the European laws. And whilst the Europeans are trying, God bless them, like with the latest laws that are being passed, they've also got the complexity of data privacy and a lot of legacy on this. And it's very difficult for them to operate as quickly as much as they want to. So I think we've got all of those geopolitical things that are going to come into play as well, that will inform the winners and losers in this battle.
What do you think about experimentation? Do you think more experiments needs to be done for, let's say, Perplexity, OpenAI? Of course, a lot of experiments have been done about, Meta as a very effective channel, Google as a very effective channel, but a lot remains to be seen with respect to, Perplexity and OpenAI.
And when we're talking experiments, you mean marketing experiments?
Yes, something like incrementality testing, lift studies, etc., geo testing.
For sure. Like, I mean, that's all of those techniques are definitely things that should be applied to any new channel. What will be interesting if we think about the time of Meta and what Google did as well, providing a good source of data for people who want to analyze how good the performance of that platform is, and doing that for free is something that makes a huge difference, right? Making that information available to all advertisers. So even the dashboards of like who's clicked, have they bought, as a simple thing that the Google kind of released first of all, how to analyze that, how to give deeper data, doing lift on Meta, how to look at whether someone has actually seen your ads or not, give you confidence that it's working, what proportion of people are responding to which messages so you can iterate and make better. Like, absolutely, if OpenAI and others are going to play in this space, that's a kind of given. They're going to have to build these tools at some point. to give advertisers what they need and what they're used to.
Mm-hmm. How much do you think AI agents are going to affect marketing measurement? I mean, if you can just explain to people what is AI agent first, that would be great. Yeah.
So massively, I think the opportunity for agents is huge. I think there's also a lot of risk that people aren't seeing with agents at the moment. So an agent, just my simple understanding or explanation of an agent is like, it's something that's going to do a task that otherwise you could do. So if we take the example of booking a restaurant, instead of me going and doing a Google search and then going and phoning the restaurant and making a booking, if it doesn't have an online booking kind of mechanism, an agent could be briefed to a Japanese restaurant on Friday evening for 2 people in this kind of area, take care of the rest. And like the agent would go ahead and make the booking, put it in the calendar for you. So that's how an agent could operate. In the world of marketing, like there's all sorts of applications that agents could do in terms of both the reporting of results, but also the placement of inventory in the first place. It's entirely possible that some of the bits of the onerous and kind of more difficult bits of the task could be done in an agentic world in the future. I say could be done. I believe this is a world that we'll see more and more, and particularly with things like GPT, the ChatGPT releasing their agents over the past couple of weeks, they make it easier for people. I think though that the challenge of agents is twofold. One, it's dangerous, right? Like I worry at the moment that the deployment of agents in all sorts of places without proper control leaves a lot of open doors and security risks. And so like my agent operates via an API, it pulls this information from this place, it does this on my platform, and then I use it for a while, it doesn't really work, and I don't shut it down. There is now an open door, possibly via an API that could be exploited at some point in the future. And I think that's something that people are not really taking into consideration as they're deploying agents at the moment. I think that's something that they really should. And then making sure that agents like not just the next shiny thing, they're actually doing something useful. So if we think about what AI helps us to do, right? AI is only useful if it's going to do something that is useful to your business. The first question that we should be asking is like, how does this actually help us? Does it help to multiply the work that we're doing? Does it help to make that work better through multiplication? Or does it actually help us to save resource? And that's the balance that leaders have got to strike in between like, am I saving heads by doing this? Am I multiplying the work that people can do by doing this? And so making that decision and applying the agent to it rather than just applying an agent because it looks fancy, So an example, I can have an agent that scrapes all the newsletters that come out on a regular basis for interesting information. That's not any good to me unless it actually does something useful or is some sort of utility for me over and above reading those newsletters myself. Putting them into one format may be useful. Is it really worth the time to write an agent to do that?
Yeah, I think change is going to be the only constant, Tony. I think this was a really, insightful session. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, Tony. And I think your book is very aptly titled Generation AI. We are indeed in the generation of, AI, and how we are going to traverse it. There are a lot more questions than answers currently, but I'm pretty sure, your book will, definitely give out a lot more answers to people seeking these questions. And having read this book, it's a excellent read, I would say, and it gives a lot of insights and it helps us ask the right questions, I can say, and congratulations on the book. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And I think that you're right. Like there are more questions and answers at the moment. And as I said earlier on, like no one's got some form of magic solution outside any of our organizations on like what we should do inside them. And I think that the forward-thinking companies are the ones that ask the questions and try and like provide those answers. And so back to what we were saying about Arima Labs, like building GPTs, when I think about your product base and the things that you're trying to use AI to do, to simplify processes for advertisers, to make information more accessible to advertisers, to make things more accurate for advertisers, like that's correct application of AI rather than just well, I should use AI or I should attach the name AI to a process that I have at the moment. Not useful unless it's doing something good for the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Tony. I think the pace at which the AI world is evolving, I think we will have to do a, a podcast again, maybe in a week or so,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps, some other player would have launched a web browser already by then.
We'll chat about it again then, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. Cheers, Venkat.